ghosts that never left the mine. They said the mine under Laurel Fork had been sealed since the winter the earth coughed fire and swallowed 300 men. In West Virginia, stories are a second kind of bedrock. They sit beneath the roads and the hollers beneath porches where folks still pick a guitar at dusk and beneath the names carved into granite on the hill. We came because a contractor promised hazard pay to survey the abandoned ninth seam. We stayed because none of us wanted to be the one to say no. 7 of us signed the waiver: Caleb the foreman, Tessa the engineer, Hank the driller, Boone broad as a door, Miguel smallest and fastest, Roy scowling descendant of a miner on the memorial wall, and me the geologist who believes rocks keep records of every breath we take around them. The entrance was a black mouth rimmed with kudzu and rust, a place daylight seemed to refuse. We checked lamps, radios, meters, and oxygen, ran fingers over dents in old helmets, folded the waiver into a pocket like a talisman that wouldn't help. When Hank tapped his lamp, a dry crack crawled along the glass, and the sound skittered down the wall like a quick, frightened insect. We clipped lines, stepped past the yellow rope, and the light behind us narrowed to a thumbnail, then a pin, then a memory that didn't warm anything. Underground, the first thing you learn is how loud your breathing is. The second is how it never quite drowns out loudness. Boot soles made a steady crunch over coal fines. Droplets ticked in the dark like a leaky clock. Somewhere far off, an empty trolley gave a thin complaint, as if remembering a job it could not do. Caleb led tracing faded chalk and paint that still warned of bad air. He whistled once low a bar of some miner's hymn I didn't know. The whistle bounced along the ribs and came back smaller, like a hand returning from a door it was afraid to knock on. We moved slow mapping and measuring. I took wall samples. Tessa marked roof bolts with a wax pencil as if underlining a Bible verse. A hoist chain to our right was stiff with orange. When Boone brushed it, the links answered with a tired clink that sounded like old teeth. The air warmed as we dropped the way the earth holds summer in its throat and will not let go. Smell is a kind of map down here. Damp paper pennies the aftertaste of a dead campfire. The big blast here, folks say, wasn't one explosion, but many a choir of methane pockets finding each other down the line, breathing together until they burned as one. Every so often we heard the mountain remember a faint, reedy sigh through roof bolt holes, a breath that wasn't ours. Miguel, smallest of us, kept glancing back. "You hearing that?" he asked. In the pause, coal sloughed somewhere ahead with a cat-tongue scrape that lifted the hair on my arms. We reached a memorial wall, names sprayed white on black matter birthdays and shift numbers eaten by mildew. Roy traced his grandfather's initials and didn't speak. A puddle there didn't ripple when you stepped near it. The water was too tired for ripples. We took 5 drank warm plastic checked ammeters and gas. They were good enough. That phrase has a body count, good enough. From the left crosscut came a threadbare singing a man's voice far away, as long summer holding a line about going where the can't-see sun warms the bones. We froze. It wasn't our radios. Those only spat the nervous hiss of static. This singing had breath and grit, the catch of a throat that knew dust. Caleb looked older in the headlamp glow. "They used to sing down here," he said softly. "Keeps the roof beasts quiet." The crosscut was shored with bowed timber slumped into the shape of a tired man. We shouldn't have gone in. We went in. My lamp picked out a helmet on a ledge, its sticker faded to a ghost of the Union logo. Something dripped where we couldn't see, plink, 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 too regular to be accident, too patient to be kind. Tessa touched my elbow. Her hand shook. Record everything she said. If methane pockets are moving, we'll hear them before we see them. What we heard first was a drill. Not ours, the old pneumatic kind, a high needling whine that burrows into your skull and twists. It rose thin as glass, then jittered into a deeper churn, like someone leaning hard on a trigger that shouldn't work anymore. Everyone looked at Hank by instinct, the man with calluses like hammered leather. He lifted his palms, not me. We pushed on the floor, pitching down coal glittering like night ground to sugar. The song braided with the drill, and the drill braided with a new voice, a clatter of rock jointing the little laugh a seam makes before it sloughs. Overhead timbers gave a warning groan, a long, low throat clearing that meant what a dog's growl means. "This is bad," Tessa said. Caleb nodded and gave the hand signal to retreat. We turned too late. The roof popped like knuckles in a giant's fist, and the first sheet of slate sighed loose. A crack raced the length of the rib, like a zipper of stone biting stone, and the mountain coughed dust into us so fast, the world became a taste. I grabbed Boone's jacket. Miguel grabbed mine. Through it all, the old man's song kept threading steady as a plumb line, as if he were counting us and refusing to stop at 7. We made the corner as the crosscut behind us folded its jaw. Boone slipped and went down on a wash of gravel. When I hauled him up, his glove left rust on my sleeve. We were breathing hard now. The gauges held, but the air felt thick, dressed in an old sickness. Ahead, the chain began to move, scraping itself along stone with a rasp, like a file on bone. It didn't sound like any draft, I knew. It sounded like a thing deciding. "Out," Caleb said. He was calm the way you have to be when everything else isn't. Behind us, something heavy settled with a thud that thumped our boot soles, the drumbeat of mass finding rest. The singing grew clearer, the voice holding a note that sat on the edge of breaking, then not breaking. We stepped faster, each of us pretending the other wasn't calculating how fast we could run in crouched posture with tanks on our backs. At the junction, my lamp caught wrong light coal, gone glossy, blistered like tar kissed by a forge. It crackled soft as paper burning, and under the crackle a small, wet simmer whispered like a pot on a low stove, as if the seam remembered how to be fired. Boone said a word you don't say, near gas. Caleb pinched the air quiet and pointed toward the fresher air sign. From somewhere deep below, a hoist cable sang a sudden steel-bright hum that climbed until it seemed to cut the air. It was answered by another thread of that old hymn, only now there were more voices, men harmonizing in the dark, where men had no business being. The mind became a throat learning our names in sound. We found the old surveyor's mark, white paint, flaked to dandruff, and saw on the floor just past it a helmet that wasn't ours. It sat upright as if placed. Inside, pooled in dust, was half a palm of black water and a single button from an old shirt. I wanted to write something to keep my hands from shaking. Tessa did it first. We are not alone. Block letters too sharp for the page. Far down the main drift, something started knocking 2 slow knocks, a pause, then 3, quick a rhythm like a code we didn't know, but felt in our ribs. Our radios woke with a spit of static that chewed a broken word down or town, and then went to snow again. We listened because we couldn't not. The lights dimmed and came back. Hank swore. Caleb lifted his hand to count us and choose a plan. I kept staring at the helmet and the water inside it, which rippled once, as if answering a step we couldn't see, taking attendance the way the dead sometimes do. "We document," I said. and we get out. Behind us, the drill screamed again, and this time it sounded hungry. We regrouped at the junction where the helmet lay. Nobody wanted to touch it. Boone muttered that it looked too clean, as though time had spared it for a reason. Caleb kept us moving, voice steady, but clipped like a man forcing calm into a crowd on a burning ship. He ordered Hank to take rear guard Tessa to log air readings every 10 minutes, and Miguel to scout the slope ahead. Roy didn't answer when called. He just kept staring at the helmet as if waiting for it to whisper. From the far drift came a sudden clang, metal against metal ringing hollow like an iron door kicked shut. The echo rolled toward us, swelling, then faded into the hiss of dust settling. Boone cursed under his breath. That ain't rock noise. No one argued. We pushed deeper because sometimes forward is safer than back. The tunnel narrowed timber posts, sagging like ribs. Every step answered with a crunch, a gritty echo that returned louder than it should, as though footsteps were doubling behind us. Miguel swore he saw a shadow dart along the wall, but it moved opposite to our lamps. The heat grew heavier. The air monitor still read safe levels, but it felt like breathing through a damp rag. We came upon an old cart jammed in its tracks. Its wheels were fused to rust, but inside, half buried in coal dust, lay a torn lunch pail and a thermos dented in the middle. Someone's initials scratched the lid. Roy's eyes widened. That's my granddad's mark. His voice cracked. He was on that shift. The silence that followed wasn't just ours. It was filled by the faint scrape of something metal dragging against stone, slow and deliberate, as though the cart wanted to move again. Caleb made the call document, then bypass. But when we tried to squeeze past, Miguel froze. Listen, there it was again, the singing. A man's voice lower this time, carrying a hymn about crossing a river of fire, the kind of song old miners used when their lungs bled dust. It came from ahead, though the air moved backward. We stood, lamps quivering each of us, pretending not to hear words we couldn't explain. Boone spat, "It's a recording." But the radios lay silent, and no one dared check them. We pressed on until the roof rose into a chamber blasted wide decades ago. The floor was a mosaic of collapsed beams, water, and coal chunks sharp as broken teeth. Every drip in that cavern was louder, fatter the splashes ringing like small detonations. Hank muttered about gas pockets and hurried us along the safer side. Then it began. A rumble low and hungry tremored through the chamber, like the mountain growling from its stomach. Dust poured from the ceiling. Tessa screamed, roof fall move. We bolted toward the far exit. Behind us, the rumble cracked open into a roar rock, snapping like gunfire, timbers popped with sharp bangs like whips. Boone shoved Miguel forward just as a slab of slate crashed down, splitting the floor where he'd stood. I turned in time to see the impossible, a shape outlined in the dust cloud, tall, chained, faceless, but human in stance. The chains rattled with a metallic snarl, dragging across stone in deliberate rhythm, chink-chink drag that bit into my chest like cold nails. Caleb yanked my collar and screamed at me to run. We stumbled through the exit drift, coughing black into our masks. When we stopped, Roy wasn't with us. His lamp flickered back in the chamber, still just at the edge of collapse. Boone shouted, his name voice ragged, but all we heard in return was a faint drawn-out note of song. The single voice melted into a choir of many layers of men singing the same verse again and again, weaving through the dust like smoke. Hank tried to charge back, but the floor had split into a black void. The cart was gone. So was Roy. All that remained was his helmet lying on the edge where the slate had cleaved upright and waiting. We pulled Boone back by force. His fists hit Caleb's chest, but Caleb didn't flinch. "He's gone," Caleb said, flat final. Boone cursed and punched the wall until his knuckles bled black dust. From below the void came a sound of bubbling coal, melting, hissing as though it were alive. Then a crack like glass shattering underwater. The smell of scorched iron wafted up, and within it, voices hummed deep guttural like throats singing through magma. Tessa's hands shook so badly, she dropped her recorder. "We need to leave," she said. "We've seen enough." But Miguel whispered, "No way out. The drift behind's gone." And he was right. The chamber had sealed itself behind us, with a mound of broken stone. We were trapped deeper. Caleb lit a chalk arrow and took us down the only remaining drift. As we walked, faint knocks started on both sides of the rib. 2 on the left, pause, 3 on the right. The rhythm circled us, echoing so clean, it felt like hands were inside the wall. Boone swung his pick into the rib, shouting curses, but the knocks only grew faster until they were almost laughter. We turned another corner, and that's when Miguel vanished. One blink he was a headlamp swinging on his chest. The next there was only his helmet rolling across the floor. He didn't scream, he didn't fall. He was gone as if the earth had inhaled him. Somewhere beneath our boots came a faint splash, then the long drag of chains sinking into water links, clanking faintly until the dark swallowed them. Tessa collapsed to her knees. "No, no, no," Boone lifted her, but her sobs filled the drift. Over her crying, another sound rose the drill again, whining shrill chewing stone, forcing itself closer, though there was no machine alive to power it. Caleb forced us into single-file shouting directions like a sergeant in war. "Eyes up, move, don't stop." The air thickened. Lamps dimmed to sepia. Shadows grew taller than our bodies, stretching backward even when we faced them. Every few feet, something scraped the roof bolts high, shrieking scratches that screeched like nails tearing slate. We kept moving until the drift opened into a second cavern. The cavern held water black and glass flat. In its center was an old hoist tower, half submerged, twisted like a drowned skeleton. From the water came faint singing, muffled as though underwater mouths were holding notes beneath the surface. Then came bubbles, bloop bloop. Then silence, followed by a chain sudden snap beneath the pool, sharp enough to echo across the walls. We stood paralyzed. Boone muttered, "We're next." Caleb's face was wet with sweat. "Not if we keep going," he said, though no one believed him. The hymn rose again, clearer now, the words cutting into us. "Down in the valley, the coal is red. Down in the valley, the living fled." The choir swelled, joined by coughs, by wheezes, by the choking sound of lungs filled with smoke. The echo was so loud, it vibrated the timbers. Every note rattled the rusted bolts until flakes of iron rained around us. We huddled close, lamps trembling. The mine was alive, and it was keeping count. The water cavern felt like a grave with no lid. The hoist tower slumped in its black pool, leaning like a drowned skeleton, begging for the surface. We kept our lamps trained on it, as if light alone might keep the shadows from climbing free. Caleb was the first to move, signaling us to skirt the edge. Boone muttered prayers under his breath, the words mangled more growl than faith. Tessa clutched her meter as though it were a crucifix. I wrote notes just to steady my shaking hands. 4 of us left, 4 out of 7. The water shifted with a gulping sound, bloop, 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 as if something beneath had turned in its sleep. Then a chain clanked underwater sharp, like a bell struck in a coffin. Boone hissed, "They're still working down there." No one corrected him. We edged along the right-hand rib. The air was hotter now, metallic, carrying the stink of smoldering stone. Somewhere in the dark, coal cracked with a dry snap, like logs breaking in a fire. When I touched the rib, the rock was warm enough to sting. "Impossible," I whispered. But the mountain doesn't care what's possible. Halfway through the cavern, Hank froze. His lamp shook in a jitter over the pool. "Did you see that?" We followed his beam. For a second, the water's skin trembled, not from us, not from any breeze. A pale hand, blistered and dripping black ash, pressed up against the surface from below, fingers spreading wide as if feeling for us. The water made a muffled slapping sound, like wet cloth on stone. Tessa shrieked. The hand dissolved into ripples. From beneath came a chorus of muffled singing, distorted like voices, drowning syllables, rising with bubbles, blurp, blurp before breaking. Caleb pushed us forward, nearly shoving us out of the cavern mouth. The next drift felt like a throat descending into hell. The walls glistened red, not with paint, but with coal that had softened into glossy seams. Every step we heard faint crackling like bacon frying, only it was stone hissing out as it melted. Boone touched the rib and jerked his hand back, skin blistering where coal had burned him. The air monitors went wild, needles spiking. "We shouldn't be here," Tessa screamed. But there was no turning back. Behind us, the cavern had filled with steam, hiding the pool in a boiling fog. The drift split into three. Caleb chose the left, trusting old survey paint half erased by heat. That's when we heard the drill again, screeching metal against rock, whining higher and higher, until it snapped into a gut-deep rumble. Hank gripped his own drill like a weapon. "That's my sound," he muttered, shaking. "That's my damn drill." The left passage opened into a furnace chamber. At least that's what it felt like. The floor was coated with a glaze of blackened slag, glowing faintly like cooling lava. In the center, a massive bore machine lay split in two, its bit twisted like a corkscrew. Around it, scattered helmets lay in a circle, as if men had knelt there once and never risen. A groan started deep metallic from the bore itself. Then came a screech, and the drill bit shuddered, turning 1 inch against stone, though no power fed it. The sound was a shriek of tortured metal, piercing keening. Hank fell to his knees, clutching his ears. "It's calling me." Before we could pull him back, the bore shivered violently. A jet of steam blasted out with a hiss like a serpent, and a spray of molten slag hissed against the walls. Boone yanked me aside just as Hank stumbled forward, arms open. The machine's twisted bit spun 1/2 turn. The sound was like bone being drilled, a wet, grinding crunch. Hank's scream was short. The bit punched through his chest, lifting him into the air as though skewering meat. His lamp swung wild, splashing light across the helmets. Blood hissed on the slag floor with a series of sharp sizzles, tis, 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 like meat fat dripping on coals. Then the drill stopped. Hank's body slumped, and the helmets rolled away as though scattering from his death. We staggered back, choking on heat and terror. Caleb forced us toward the far tunnel. Boone muttered, "One more gone. We're next." The drift beyond narrowed again. The walls here bore marks, scratches that weren't from drills, but from nails. Gouges dragged long, frantic, uneven. Some were deep enough to peel stone. Tessa touched one with trembling fingers. "They tried to claw out," she whispered. Then the singing returned. Not hymns this time, but work songs, men chanting rhythm to pickaxes, voices layered, counting in beats. Thunk, thunk, pause. Their words slurred into echoes, but the cadence was clear. Dig, dig, dig. Every few seconds, a loud slam echoed like a pick hitting stone just beside us, though the walls never moved. The passage ended in a stope, an abandoned cut where coal burned faintly like coals in a dying fire. The glow cast our shadows tall and twisted, doubling them across the walls. Somewhere above, a chain rattled fast, frantic then slack, as though something had just been hauled into darkness. Boone grabbed my shoulder. "Did you hear that they're pulling men up there?" We circled the stope, looking for a way through. Tessa suddenly gasped. In the corner lay a set of tools, pickaxe, hammer, shovel. But they weren't abandoned. They were glowing red metal, soft, as if just pulled from a forge. The hammer clanged once loud, hollow, though no one touched it. Caleb hissed, "Don't approach." But Boone was already stepping forward, eyes wide, as if the tools pulled at him. The shovel lifted by itself, scraping stone with a screech. The sound was nails on slate, long and punishing. Boone staggered, clutching his head. "It's in me," he cried. "They want me." Before we could drag him back, the shovel swung. Not at us, at him. It struck his leg with a meaty crack. Boone collapsed, screaming. The pickaxe lifted and drove into his chest with a metallic thunk burying deep. Blood pooled black on the glowing floor, steaming. Boone's scream cut into silence. The tools dropped at once, clattering with finality. Tessa vomited into her mask. Caleb pulled her upright, eyes blazing but hopeless. Only 3 of us left now. From the far rib came slow dragging chains, again metallic grinds, echoing clink, clink, drag. The hymn rose low and guttural. Bury the bones, bury the breath. It was not one voice now, but hundreds crowding the drift with sound, until the walls seemed to shake. We staggered forward into the last drift, deeper than any map marked. Behind us, the chamber hissed as slag cracked like a chorus of snapping knuckles. Ahead, the dark waited thick and alive. The mine was not a place anymore. It was a body, and we were still inside it. The deeper drift felt like a throat that no longer ended. The air clawed our lungs with every breath. Each inhale tasted of rust, smoke, and the copper tang of old blood. 3 of us left, Caleb, Tessa, and me. Boone was gone, Hank was gone. Roy and Miguel swallowed without a scream. The mine had taken 4, and it wanted more. Caleb kept us moving, though his voice had lost its calm. He barked orders sharp and fast, like he thought speed alone could outrun what stalked us. Tessa staggered pale and trembling, her recorder clutched to her chest. I couldn't tell if she was gathering data or holding on to the last fragment of sanity. Behind us, faint chains began to rattle, chink, chink, drag. The sound echoed, as though thousands of links were being pulled across stone. Every pause felt intentional, like something stopping to listen. We turned a corner into a wider cut. The walls here were slick with black water glistening as if the rock itself were weeping. In the glow of our lamps, streaks of rust red smeared down like blood. A sudden knock echoed 3 loud bangs on the roof, boom, 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 shaking dust loose in choking clouds. Tessa cried out, clutching her mask. Caleb snapped, "Keep moving." His light caught on something hanging from a roof bolt. It dangled by a corroded chain, a miner's lantern swaying though there was no wind. As it swung, the chain squealed with a long metallic shriek. Free! Free! The light inside flared, once then died, plunging the chamber into blackness, until our own lamps regained control. We skirted the lantern and entered a chamber that widened into an old lift shaft. The cage itself was gone, nothing but a pit that vanished into bottomless dark. The smell rising from it was rancid, scorched like flesh that had burned and kept burning. From the pit came whispers at first, dry, raspy, like lungs gasping through coal dust. Then the whispers turned to humming low and steady, weaving into a tune. Finally, a chorus burst out, men's voices singing an old shift song about 12 hours, under 12 hours, over 12 hours gone. The shaft walls seemed to vibrate with it, sending tremors through our boots. Tessa sobbed. "It's them. They're still down there." She dropped her recorder, which clattered into the pit. The falling metal echoed endlessly, clink, 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 until it was swallowed. Caleb pulled her back, eyes front. We don't look down. He led us to a catwalk, bridging the shaft, but halfway across the chains returned. First, a faint rattle, then louder, then deafening as though 1,000 shackles were dragged across steel. Chink, chink, drag, chink, chink, drag. Our lamps flickered. Then something appeared, chains coiling up from the darkness below, rising like serpents. They lashed the railing, wrapping around it with metallic cracks. One snapped tight around Caleb's arm, yanking him hard against the bars. He screamed, trying to pry free. I grabbed him, pulling with all my strength, but the chain burned my gloves with searing heat. The links screeched as they pulled, dragging Caleb toward the pit. The sound was nails on slate steel grinding against steel. He roared, "Cut me loose!" I pulled my hammer and smashed at the links. Sparks flew, but the chain only tightened. Caleb's face twisted in pain. His last words, "Get her out." Then the chain wrenched him over the railing. His scream faded as the links clanged down the shaft, clang, 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 until both man and sound were gone. I stood shaking, the echo still vibrating in my skull. Tessa collapsed against me, sobbing. Only 2 left now. We stumbled off the catwalk into another drift. The walls were lower, forcing us to crouch. Every movement scraped helmets against stone, sending hollow knocks echoing like a drumbeat. Dust hung thick, turning our lamps into dull orbs. Ahead, the drift opened into a low chamber where dozens of helmets lay scattered, arranged in a circle. Inside the circle, a single chain coiled like a snake, unmoving. Tessa whispered, "Don't go in there." But then the helmets began to rattle, tap, 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 each one vibrating against the stone floor, striking in rhythm. The circle closed tighter, helmets sliding inward as though pushed by unseen hands. The chain twitched, then it rose. The rattling grew louder until it was a deafening clatter, helmet striking chain, whipping the floor, clang, clang, clang. The sound hit us like a storm. Tessa screamed, clutching her ears. I dragged her away, running down the nearest drift. We ran blind, guided only by flickering light. The floor tilted steeply, pulling us downward. Behind us, the sound followed, chains, dragging helmets, clattering voices singing louder. The hymn was now a scream, every note sharp, raw, echoing with agony. We stumbled into another chamber, this one carved wider, filled with old carts. Their wheels were twisted, their loads of coal long since fused into black glass. As we entered, the carts moved. Wheels screeched, axles groaned. The metallic howl rose, eek, as the carts began rolling toward us. We leapt aside. One slammed into the wall with a crash, scattering sparks. Another barreled straight through the chamber, vanishing into dark. The screeching filled the air, iron against stone, until my teeth ached. Tessa crouched, trembling. "It's not letting us leave," she whispered. I pulled her forward, deeper still. The mine was squeezing us, driving us into its stomach. Finally, the drift spat us into the deepest chamber yet. Here the air was thick, almost solid, reeking of sulfur. A shaft above glowed faint red, casting light like a wound. The chamber floor was broken into fissures from which hot breath rose. From below came low moans, dozens of them rising into a dirge. Tessa fell to her knees screaming, "Stop it! Stop singing!" But the song only grew louder, the voices joining chains rattling in harmony, helmets clattering like drums. The chamber itself vibrated, every rock groaning, every seam sighing. I pulled Tessa back, but she didn't move. She stared at the fissures, eyes wide, whispering, "They're coming up." The ground trembled. From the fissures burst chains, snapping free with loud cracks. Clang, 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 one whipped around Tessa's ankle. She shrieked, clawing at it, but it yanked her down hard. I lunged to grab her, but more chains lashed out. The sound was unbearable metal, shrieking voices chanting the dirge, rising into a scream. Tessa's last words, "Don't let them bury me." Then she was gone, dragged screaming into the fissure. The chain's rattle faded into the earth, chink, chink, drag, until silence returned. I was alone. The chamber pulsed with heat and noise. Voices swelled, chains writhed, carts groaned. The hymn thundered so loud, the air itself shook. And above it all, one voice carried clear a single miner, singing slow and mournful, counting a roll call that ended not at 7, but at 1. Me. I stood alone in the chamber chest, heaving lungs raw from smoke and fear. The fissures glowed red beneath me, breathing heat, as if the earth itself had lungs. 7 had entered. 6 were gone. Only I remained. From below the voices rose again, 100 men singing together, their hymn shaking the stone around me. The chains clattered in rhythm, clink, clink, drag. Helmets rattled in unison, tapping like bone knuckles on a coffin lid. I staggered backward, searching for any passage out. My lamp sputtered, throwing shadows that stretched into grotesque shapes. My notes fell from my trembling hands, pages scattering across the floor like dead leaves. "Why me?" I whispered. The mind seemed to answer. A deep moan echoed from the fissures, rolling like thunder under stone. Then came the sound of boots, heavy measured, dozens of them, thump, 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 marching closer, though no one stood before me. Out of the smoke I saw them. Shadows of miners, faceless, their bodies cloaked in cold dust. Chains wrapped their torsos, their arms, their legs dragging against the stone. They did not stumble. They walked in perfect rhythm, singing their hymn as they came for me. I tried to run, but the chamber narrowed every fissure, glowing, every path blocked by fire and shadow. My lamp died. Darkness pressed in. Then the drills screamed again, high, piercing metal on bone, whining through the dark, until it felt like it was inside my skull. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears. The faceless miners circled me. One placed a helmet at my feet. Another laid a rusted pick beside me. The chains slithered, wrapping softly around my wrists and ankles. They weren't cruel. They were ritual. I understood then the mind wasn't hunting us out of hatred. It was keeping count. Filling the roll call left unfinished that night of the explosion. I screamed as the fissure beneath me split wider. The roar of rock breaking was deafening, boom, followed by the hiss of molten coal bubbling up like a cauldron. The chains yanked. I was dragged down into heat and blackness, my scream swallowed by their hymn. When the rescue crews returned weeks later, they found nothing. Only a scattered notebook pages smeared black with coal dust. A helmet lying upright at the chamber's center. Locals say if you stand near Laurel Fork on a quiet night, you can still hear it. The distant sound of men singing voices echoing from beneath the earth. The clink of chains, the scrape of drills. the faint rattle of helmets knocking together like teeth, and always that one last voice, counting the names of those who went down and never came back.